Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our masterclass on how to escape the dieting hamster wheel. We have Skyterra Embrace registered dietitian Elyssa Pattillo presenting today. My name is Stephanie Lewis, and I have a few housekeeping items before we get going. If you're having trouble seeing the full slide on your screen, you can go to View and Fit to Screen, and that should help with that. And then as the webinar progresses, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat box, and I will make sure that Elyssa gets those at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elyssa.
Perfect. Thanks, Stephanie. All right, so I'm going to begin this webinar by just asking a series of questions to get us started. Have you ever felt like you live inside of a dieting hamster wheel? Have you felt as if you're constantly on and off a diet, constantly losing weight, only to find that you regain it again? If that's the case, you're not alone. Many of us find ourselves stuck in this pattern, and really for what? The pursuit of health, or maybe the achievement of an unrealistic body image ideal that our society places on us? Well, I'm here to tell you today that I don't believe these unrealistic lifelong dieting endeavors have to be the answer. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Elyssa Pattillo. I'm the registered dietitian for Skyterra Embrace. My career experience involves time as a registered dietitian in the eating disorder treatment world, working in the IOP, PHP, and residential settings, as well as time as a clinical dietitian at the largest hospital here in Western North Carolina. The combination of my personal and my professional experience has really fueled my passion for nutrition, and most specifically, it's fueled my passion for being an advocate for an approach to health and wellness that contradicts so much of what our society places on us today. So my hope through today's masterclass is that it may begin to challenge some of your thoughts and beliefs while providing you with realistic knowledge that you can take home with you today. If dieting is something that you've never really given much thought to, or maybe I should say the success of dieting, maybe that's something you've never really given much thought to. If that's the case, I encourage you to consider this question. Could dieting be promoting the exact opposite of what it's intended to achieve? So this is what I hope to uncover for you in today's masterclass. Okay. The world we live in at times can feel as though we're consumed by diet culture and constantly inundated by all the information that it provides. And I find this unfortunate because it creates a ton of confusion and really distraction. In order to allow you to kind of resonate with what I'm talking about, I want to do an exercise with you all. So if everyone, as long as you're willing, of course, if everyone can hold up their non-dominant hand, we're then going to take our dominant hand and we're going to pinch the area between our index finger and our thumb. So when you're squeezing that area between your index finger and thumb, you will likely feel a dull, achy sensation. That is okay. That is what we're going for, so bear with me. Keep squeezing that spot as I read the statements on the screen. Carbs are good. No, carbs are bad. Fats are good. No, fats are bad. No, fats are good again. Fruit is healthy. No, fruit has way too much sugar. Count your calories. No, count your macros. Apple cider vinegar increases metabolism. Excess carbs cause obesity. Excess calories make you fat. Gluten-free diet, plant-based diet, carnivore diet, celery juice, prebiotics, probiotics, supplements. Woo, okay. Everyone, you can let go of your hands now. Gosh, how overwhelming. Does anyone feel more anxious or stressed? Did anyone find those contradictory statements that I was verbalizing to be confusing? Or was anyone so distracted by that dull, achy sensation in your hand that while you were squeezing that area, did you find that sensation so distracting that you weren't even really able to pay attention to all those statements that I was verbalizing? What you just experienced is a representation really of our daily lives in diet culture. That constant noise or chatter that is surrounding us, not always making sense. It's often contradicting itself. It's inflicting stress, anxiety, confusion, and it's always there. Can anyone relate to this? I know I can. As a registered dietitian, I'll admit, I kind of signed up for this, and still I find myself so frustrated and so confused at times by what I call nutrition noise. I mean, that's really what it is, right? It's noise, and we're creating more confusion, and we're unable to identify where the truth lies. My hope today is to shed light on why you feel so confused, and why you feel trapped inside of that hamster wheel, as we're calling it. And I want to offer up an opportunity for you to consider a much more compassionate and freeing approach to nutrition that you may not have considered in the end, or that you may not have considered before. But in the end, I truly believe that it can allow you to feel as if you've gained your life back. All right, so as many of you know, diets are not new. They have been around for years and years. And just as is represented through this image that you see on the screen, a new one is coming out, gaining attraction, being launched or released really every few years. And they're all being promoted as being the solution to our overweight or obesity problem. But have you ever considered this? If diets worked, why is there a new one that comes out every few years? A new name, a similar approach, all with the exact same underlying strategy: restriction. So here's what I meant when I said, if diets worked. 95% of dieters will regain the weight they lost within 1 to 5 years. Based on NHANES data, the percentage of young women aged 20 to 39 that were trying to lose weight is 59.3%. Body shaming starts as young as 6 years old. And 30% of those who are seeking weight loss treatment show signs of binge eating disorder. And I want to revisit one of those statistics really quick. The first one that you see on the screen says 95% of dieters will regain the weight they lost within 1 to 5 years. That means only about 5% of individuals successfully lose and maintain this weight loss. And sometimes you'll hear this, especially in the nutrition world, you'll hear these individuals referred to as weight loss unicorns, because they're so rare. 5% is a small percentage. And if you're interested, there's actually a study that sheds light on the parallels between anorexia nervosa, which is a diagnosed eating disorder, and then those few percent, that 5% of individuals that are able to sustain weight loss long-term. The study title is Long-Term Weight Loss Maintenance in Obesity, Possible Insights from Anorexia Nervosa. And based on this study, in short, they essentially found that both individuals with anorexia and individuals that had successfully maintained weight loss long-term, they both manifest the metabolic profiles that oppose further weight loss and actually promote weight regain. So what that looks like is when they look metabolically, they're seeing an increase in hunger hormones. So essentially those individuals should be feeling hungrier, which typically would, drive us to want to eat. They're also seeing a decrease in satiety hormones. So that would mean Individuals are feeling less satiated and satisfied at meals, which should in turn typically drive individuals to eat more in order to feel full and feel satisfied and satiated. In this study, they're also seeing metabolically that there's a decrease in both these cases in resting energy expenditure. So that whole picture really should be preventing further weight loss, and ultimately it should be promoting weight regain. But what they're finding is that both these groups of individuals are overriding that powerful biological drive in order to maintain a reduced weight. So they're exhibiting these successful weight loss maintainers are essentially exhibiting very similar profiles to an individual that has a diagnosed eating disorder. So if you're interested, look up that study. Okay. So we live in a society that leads us to believe we are smart and our bodies are not. We all have the answers. It's just a matter of strength and willpower, right? And that anyone can do it. We buy into this belief and we commit to these dietary regimens that are extremely strict and unrealistic to maintain from the beginning. And so the image you're seeing on this slide is really utilized to represent all of the factors that are involved in the limited success of diets. So let's start with unrealistic expectations. So unrealistic expectations, I think that's fairly self-explanatory. We have unrealistic expectations in many areas of our life often, but in the case of limited success of diets, we would be looking at things like black and white thinking. So thinking errors. Black and white thinking might look like someone that has the viewpoint of these foods are good, these others are bad. Maybe it would also look like all or nothing thinking. So an example of that could be someone who has the view of, I can't have anything processed, no sweets, no dairy, no gluten, right? So it can be that all or nothing. It can be pretty strict. Another example of unrealistic expectations could look like expecting yourself to exercise 1 to 2 hours every single day, giving your body no opportunity at rest. And really what we would see there is, one, the inability to comply with that long term, because think about an injury, think about being sick, think about the fatigue and the soreness that our body's experiencing given that extreme expectation and that demand on our body. Another example would be expectations to lose more weight in a week, in a month, in a year than is reasonable, which would lead us down that rabbit hole of it being unsuccessful, which then can often, what I have experienced through the work that I do, is it can end up resulting in a lot of feelings of failure, and just like dissatisfaction with self, feeling like we are not good enough. Let's touch on biology and behavior. I think a lot of times we think of behavior as being one of the main drivers for the inability to maintain weight loss. Behavior would look like someone's meal patterns, their exercise or movement frequency. It could be sitting versus standing throughout the day. It could also be looking at like how many steps they're getting in a day. Biology, on the other hand, is the one that I find most intriguing. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of research out there about twin family and adoption studies. And what they found through this research is that the heritability of obesity is between 40 and 70%. An example of this is a study that was conducted on 540 Danish adult adoptees. In this study, they compared the adoptees to their adoptive and biological parents. And what they found was there was no relationship whatsoever between the weight of the adoptive parents and the adoptees. The environment that was provided by the adoptive parents was largely irrelevant in this study. On the other hand, though, they found a strong, consistent correlation between the biological parents and the biological adult child's weight. The reason I share this study is because it really represents the fact that biology plays a huge role in our weight trajectory. Behaviors play a role for sure, but we also cannot deny that biology is a driving force in body composition and overall ability to maintain weight loss. The next would be our obesogenic environment. I think many of us are familiar with this. So the industrialization of our food system has led to the production of convenience foods that are inexpensive. They're often less nutrient rich. With that, I always like to add in, when we're thinking about convenience, we're often so caught up in these really, really busy lives where we're eating on the go. We're not incorporating as much mindfulness sitting at a table. It can look like eating out of packages as opposed to plated meals, sitting in front of the TV, etc. In addition, these due to this industrialization of our food system, we're seeing foods that are constructed in a way that have kind of super normal appetitive properties. Think sugar, salt, and fats all combined into one food that really just drive us to want them more. And our lives have become busier, yet our occupations have become more sedentary, and there's less, in some ways I want to say ability or opportunity. There's less need to walk to work or bike to work. We're heavily reliant upon vehicular transportation. So we're slowing down on the movement, and we're now driven towards more convenience foods. So next would be talking about our physiological response to weight loss. So weight loss is accompanied by persistent hormonal adaptations that are going to increase appetite and decrease satiety, kind of like we talked about earlier when I mentioned that study about the parallels between anorexia nervosa and those weight loss maintainers. So in this case, we are, our body is fighting in order to maintain homeostasis. And essentially what's happening is our hunger hormones, our hormones that tell us we're hungry and we need food, they're they're increasing, driving us to gravitate towards it because our body's telling us it needs it. And then our satiety hormones are decreasing. So we are feeling less full because our body needs food. It's trying to give us every sign to feed it, to fuel it, so that we're taking care of it. As people progressively lose more and more weight, what we're finding, like physiologically, is that they're fighting this uphill battle against all these biological responses that are trying to oppose weight loss. An example of kind of what's happening internally in our body, because we're like, I know in the work that I do, I talk to a lot of people that I find, because of the culture we live in, we really resist how smart, how intelligent our bodies are. But I always like to reiterate, our bodies are capable of so much more than we give them credit for. And the examples I'm going to provide to speak to that, I'm going to give you 4. So calories are needed, or energy is needed, to heat our body. With fewer calories or less energy that's available, we're going to feel like, well, our body's ability to heat itself is going to be reduced. So we're going to constantly feel full. Another example is blood pressure. So energy is needed to maintain blood pressure. With less energy available, our body provided 4 examples on what's happening internally. The last one we'll review. So calories are needed to replace hair and nails. So with fewer calories or less energy available, essentially our hair and nails are not able to be replaced, which can result in the brittle nails and the hair loss. So I'm sharing this because it's an example of really how intelligent our bodies are and how much our body is fighting like heck to maintain homeostasis, all in an effort to survive. And it's in that state of significant caloric deprivation that's occurring. And lastly, our psychological response. So what's happening with this is our body is fighting against that deprivation, that desire for further weight loss by, the most frequent thing is like a hyperfixation on food. So a hyperfixation on food can lead us to being less distracted when we're connecting with others. Thus, really the inability to truly make meaningful connection. This can lead to isolation that tends to come from people just feeling like they're really not able to connect to the people that they're around. They also may be driven to withdraw from social situations out of fear for food exposure. So if we think about going to a friend's birthday party, knowing that there's going to be cake and cookies and all of these forbidden foods, that individual may be driven to not participate, to withdraw from those experiences because of concern that they won't be able to trust themselves from consuming those forbidden foods. So it can lead to some self-isolation as well as that hyperfixation, which really looks like constantly thinking about food, constantly seeing food everywhere. I've read studies before where individuals are like collecting cookbooks. They're constantly on Pinterest looking for recipes because they literally cannot stop thinking about food. And that's really the body speaking to what it needs, and the fact that it's feeling deprived and it's feeling scared. So next, we're going to talk about the dieting hamster wheel. So this is really what we're talking about, right? And what I find through the work that I do with individuals is oftentimes this hamster wheel is so very descriptive of their experience, and they resonate with it so much, but they've never been able to put to words why. And so my hope is that by seeing this hamster wheel, if you haven't seen something like this before, you will realize why we kind of get trapped in this cycle. So it starts with a desire to change. Often that's a desire to change body size, body composition. That leads us down the path of dieting or restricting. From there, as we've already talked about today, that can lead to the body feeling deprived or starved. And with that, we see an increase in hunger and cravings, which is often associated with those compulsive thoughts about food, or that hyperfixation that we just spoke about on the prior slide. When there's an increase in hunger and an increase in cravings, we then start to see, or most people will experience, this fear of loss of control around food. So an example that I'll throw out would be thinking about a weekend away with friends in a house full of all of these forbidden foods. I could see, if you're on a very restrictive diet, it being really challenging to feel safe in a home where all these foods that have been written off are available. And so often what we find is that it lends itself to an environment that doesn't feel safe, and the individual ends up rebelling. That can look like eating in secret. It can look like overeating, binge eating, etc. From there, what we find is the individual is flooded with feelings of guilt and shame, often feeling like they failed, and that they are blaming themselves because of their lack of willpower. But we go right back on that diet because it worked, right? And we failed. We will be stronger and more diligent this time, is often what I hear. And so the cycle persists. As you can see, though, this is all the result of the society that we live in and the messages that we internalize. It's your fault. You need willpower. You need more discipline. And it's so easy for us to revert back to what we believe works, and that's a diet. But that leads us right back into that same hamster wheel that we're trying so hard to get out of. So I'm here to offer you an alternative idea. And no, it's not another diet. I'm hopeful at this point you're realizing that dieting is not our answer. This alternative approach requires a shift in mindset. I personally am a firm believer that our health is vital. Taking care of our health is so important. And I feel strongly that it should not come at the expense of our mental, our emotional, and our social health, all to try to take care of our physical one. Oftentimes, diets can be more life depriving than they ever will be life giving. And the brain on the left is really a representation of this. It's a representation of what mental space often looks like when we're on restrictive diets and constantly consumed by diet culture. We're so fixated on food and body that it gives us little space to think about and experience everything else. Think back to that example at the very beginning where we were holding up our hand and we were squeezing that area right between our index finger and our thumb. And I voiced, the question of, did it increase feelings of anxiety? Did it increase stress? Maybe cause some confusion or distraction? The brain on the right is a representation of what mental space can look like with a renewed sense of food, health, body, or a renewed view of it. You've got mental space for everything. Health is included in that, but so is the opportunity to connect with those that we love, to feel our emotions, to explore hobbies, to do school, to do work, to take care of ourselves through self-care practices. So there is opportunity for so much more and so much more opportunity to be engaged and in connection with those around us. So now I offer you 9 ways to help you get off of the dieting hamster wheel. And we will go through each of these in detail. But the first is really to start off by removing the focus from weight altogether. The second, to make things simple. Third, to use portion sizes or hand models as a guide. Fourth, to turn from an external focus to an internal one. Then 5, to explore what's driving your food choices. 6, to change from restriction to addition. 7, to establish new goals. 8, to explore the process of intuitive eating. And then 9, to find movement that is joyful and feels good for your body. So now we get to go in detail on all of them. So what I'm talking about with the first one, so remove the focus from weight altogether. At Embrace, we recognize that weight loss is often a symptom of a change in behaviors. So an example I may utilize in this case would be, I have worked with young women in the past where COVID shut everything down. And with that, they lost their community at the gym. So with a decrease in opportunity to connect with others in a gym space, it led them to having to work out at home, which they felt less motivated to do. There was less accountability, so they were less engaged. So with less movement, they then turned towards less nutrient-rich food choices. More of those highly palatable foods. Think the fat, sugar, and salt that I was talking about earlier. With that, what I've heard is that the change in those behaviors, individuals then started noticing changes in body size that were scary. And so they went on the path of a diet with restriction. And that led them into the cycle of restricting and then binging. And with that, they noticed more weight gain. So with an approach of taking the focus off of weight loss altogether, we are going to direct that attention towards behaviors. And so in the case of the example I just shared, that individual, if we hit home on restriction, weight loss, we're not approaching the problem or the root cause. And the root cause stems from, they lost their community, which gave them the accountability and the motivation to move their body and to work out and engage in exercise, which led them down the path of eating less nutrient rich foods and then eating less often. So we start by attacking that. And we recognize that, as I mentioned earlier, our bodies are so smart and so much smarter than we give them credit for. And the image at the bottom of this slide is a representation of what's called set point weight or set point theory. And it's this theory that our body will fight and fight and fight to maintain homeostasis. And with homeostasis, our body has a weight range that it feels best at. And so our belief is that by approaching it from the standpoint of let's focus on behaviors, we recognize and we trust that the body will take care of the rest. If weight loss is needed, we trust that once we have the behaviors regulated, weight loss will result, but that's not our driving force. And what we find through this approach is that it is way more sustainable for individuals because we're getting them on a more regular eating pattern, eating 3 times a day, giving their body the space and the opportunity to regulate hunger and satiety hormones, and really turn inward, which we'll get into a little bit later on through these 9 key points. So next is really the focus on making things simple, because we're going for sustainability, right? And diets are not proving to be sustainable long term. So what is our sustainable option? And at Skyterra Embrace, we use the Skyterra plate as our framework for meals. So our students are working really hard to create balanced meals that look similar to the Skyterra plate or as closely to the Skyterra plate as possible, because we know that through intake that looks like this or the creation of meals like this, it can assist in improvements in satiety. So feeling full and satisfied at meals. It can help with improved blood sugar regulation. It can help with mood and energy regulation. So all these things that are so vital for us to feel better and to promote longevity, to decrease the risk of health problems or chronic disease. So we are making it simple by using this framework. On the right side of the screen, you see the eating pendulum. And this is really a tool that I use with our students all the time at Embrace to give voice to what that experience is, where we're swinging from restricting all the way to rebelling. So the example I give for our students, and I'm going to try to kind of act this out a little bit for you while I'm sitting. If we think about our relationship with food, and what happens with diets is we often go on these really restrictive diets that, as we have talked about so far today, is that they're just not sustainable. And the reason being is that if I had a 10-pound weight in my hand off to the side, it's going to kind of mimic restriction, okay? So I can only hold that 10-pound weight up in my arm for so long before it comes crashing all the way down. And that's very much like restriction. We can restrict, and resist giving in as much as we want, but eventually the force of that weight is going to come swinging down. And if it weren't for my legs, in this case, stopping me, my arm would swing all the way to the other side, and that's rebellion. So that rebellion can look like eating in secret, as I talked about earlier. It can be binge eating, as so many experience, or really the verbiage of just eating out of abundance, like eating a large quantity of food, larger than may be necessary, and that repeated pattern. which we get into the pendulum of swinging back and forth, because after that experience of eating large amounts of food, we are flooded with that guilt and that dissatisfaction with self. And we're led to believe, because of our society, that restriction is our answer. And we just swing back and forth. So to find some stability in this so that we can get out of the extremes, what we do at Embrace is we incorporate elements of mindful eating and intuitive eating, or attuned eating, that can help an individual turn from these external factors of diets and turn to being more present, being more aware during the eating experience, and paying more attention to what their body needs, because that can normalize the pattern and allow us to get out of those extremes. Next, we've got use of portion sizes and hand models. A lot of times with diets, we've got counting calories, we've got counting points, we've got counting macros, all these other things, and it can get so confusing. And the tool that I like to use that is so simple is that most of us have our hand with us, right? And we can use that hand in order to estimate how much protein, how much carbohydrate, fats, vegetables that our body needs at meals. And so one of the ways when our students are working to learn about really what fuels their body, what portion sizes allow them to feel best at meals, they will use this framework and this tool to help. So if we're thinking about a protein, so palm size protein is giving us a really good quality and quantity of protein. That's about 20 to 30 grams at a meal. That's what we're looking for. So palm size, we can start there. For carbohydrates, we can go with a mounded handful. That would be about half a cup of carbohydrates. For fats, we're looking at a thumb size. So that's one fat, right? But if we think about a salad, most of us are going to use, maybe 2 tablespoons of dressing. So we'd be looking at 2 thumbs worth. And then veggies, a fist, that's about a cup of vegetables. So that's a great serving. And the cool thing about this is I may work with individuals at Embrace that start off doing a palm size of a protein, a mounded handful of a carbohydrate. This is eyeballing, of course. A thumb size-ish for a fat, and then a fist of vegetables. And it allows them the opportunity to check in with themselves after the meal and say, man, am I full? Am I satisfied? And if not, it's an opportunity to check in and see, what did I feel like I was missing? Maybe they felt like I just didn't feel like I got enough vegetables. So we can go in and we can say, hey, let's keep doing what we're doing and let's increase it to 2 fists worth of vegetables this time. And then it allows them the opportunity to continue to do those check-ins to figure out what their body needs, and it eliminates the focus on calories, on macros, etc. Perfect. So turning from an external focus to an internal focus, I have insinuated this throughout the talk today, and this is an approach that we take at Embrace. So again, we are removing that focus from diets, and we are trying to focus our attention inward to learn more about what this body that we have, this tool that we have access to and knows so much and is so intelligent. We're turning our attention towards that to learn more about what it needs. And I think of it as like building a relationship with our body so that it is one that's founded on trust. We can trust that our body knows what we need. And it's also founded on like an opportunity to respect that need through proper nourishment. So instead of focusing on those external calories, we're turning it inward, and a tool that we can use for that is what you're seeing on the screen, and that's our hunger and fullness scale. There's a lot of hunger and fullness scales out there, but they are all very similar. In this case, 1 through 5 in the hunger and fullness scale that we're using is a representation of hunger experience. And then 6 through 10, or actually 5 through 10, is really a representation of fullness. And the numbers at the bottom with the verbiage is a description of what that sensation may feel like. The goal is to begin identifying hunger between a 3 and a 4, and then stopping our meal at a satisfaction rating of like a 6 to a 7, or fullness rating of a 6 to a 7. I have worked with students where this is really challenging because the verbiage is very vague, and they're like, an example might be number 2, number 3, hungry, need to eat. And so it's so vague that they're so out of touch with their body that they're not sure what that feels like. So what I've done is eliminated the verbiage from it, and they have had the opportunity to fill out their own hunger and fullness scale. So it's a check-in point to say, hey, I think I'm at a 3, but what does a 3 feel like internally? And for them, it could be my stomach is rumbling. It could be a headache, any of those things, but it's making it a more individualized approach for that student, and really giving them that opportunity and that space to learn more about this body that they have. This is what we're talking about when we say begin to explore what's driving your food choices. So a lot of times, if we're in that diet mentality, consumed by diet culture, our food choices are driven by the allotment of calories, or the allotment of macronutrients, or the allotment of points, or whatever. In this case, what we know is that we want to turn our attention inward, and through that, we want to find out what's driving our desire to eat. So this is a tool that I use with our students frequently, and it gets used in more than just the field of nutrition, but it's a HALT acronym. And as you're aware, I'm sure, HALT is really just another word for pause. It's an opportunity for our students to pause and check in. And so they may ask themselves, am I hungry for the H? Am I angry or anxious for the A? Am I lonely for the L? Or am I tired for the T? And here they may go through that series of questions, and maybe they say, I'm hungry. They feel hungry. From there, they may ask, assess, have I eaten in the past 2 to 4 hours? And so they're diving into really, are they hungry, or did they just eat 30 minutes ago, and were we missing something? And exploring, why could I already be hungry? The angry or anxious, lonely, and then tired, that is an opportunity to encourage them to pause, because it's really not an immediate indication of the need for food. And so what I encourage is for them to begin to ask themselves, what do they need right now to support that feeling, that emotion that they're experiencing? And the work that I do with them also is exploring, what are activities that they enjoy that take about 20 to 25 minutes. It could be taking a bath. It could be taking a walk, journaling, coloring, knitting, any of these things, because sometimes all we need is about 20 to 25 minutes for an urge to pass. And this is, it takes time, and it's that continued work of learning more about our body, what it needs, and really what's the driving force behind our desire to eat. Perfect. So we've got the change from restriction to addition. And an example of this that I like to utilize with our students at Embrace is a 3-legged stool analogy. And this has been taken and adopted from 2 dietitians that I follow, and I value their input and creativity so much. And through that, I've adopted this 3-legged stool, where if we think about food from the standpoint of having 3 roles, we've got fuel, which an example could be carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are our body's primary source of energy. We've got function. We can think fiber. So fiber helps with gut health. It helps with bowel regularity. It helps with decreasing cholesterol. And then we've got the fun. I can't think of anything really. I can think of a lot of fun things, but I can think of cake with my friends on their birthday. Like that is so fun to share in that experience. And with a three-legged stool, I know when I see a stool, I sit on it and I don't really doubt that it's going to be stable and it's going to hold me up. So let's say I'm sitting on that stool, but someone came over there and they thought it would be funny to unscrew one of the legs. Well, I went from a three-legged stool that was very stable to a two-legged one. And is that two-legged stool going to be very stable? No, probably not. Can I hold it up? Maybe, with a ton of core stability and a lot of work and effort on my end. But eventually I'm going to feel beat down. I'm going to feel tired. I'm going to feel fatigued and unable to maintain the stability of that stool long term. And the same is true for diets, and what is represented through this example. So most diets eliminate the fun of food and tell us lead us to believe that we can't have cake or cookies or highly palatable bad foods. And so we're eliminating the fun. Think that fun leg is being unscrewed, and now we're left with a two-legged stool focused on the fuel and the function of food. And that's really that representation of how diets don't lend themselves towards being sustainable long term, because we are going to feel tired, we're going to feel fatigued and unable to maintain it forever. Perfect. So we've got establishing new goals. So examples of this can look like, and with establishing new goals, the reason this is a piece of the 9 key key components that we're focused on is because we want to start setting goals that are not focused solely on weight, right? We want to set goals that drive us towards improvements in behavior, recognizing that weight loss may be a symptom of that, but our focus is on repairing that relationship with food and with body through improvements in these behaviors. So examples could be consuming a fruit or vegetable at every meal. We can always value from more fiber in our diet and more produce and the vitamins and minerals, antioxidants that come from that. Next would be making half of our plate at lunch and dinner non-starchy vegetables. So if we know that we are not inclined to incorporate vegetables frequently except for dinner, a really easy goal to go to would be like, okay, I always do a vegetable at dinner. Let me make sure I get one at lunch. I've had students before that are always driven towards, like, let's say white foods. It's a sandwich, and with the sandwich that they're taking, maybe chips is the side, and then a cheese stick, right? Well, they may set their goal, instead of focused on only vegetables or that kind of thing, they may just say, I want to make my meals as colorful as possible. And indirectly, it's going to be a way to drive variety for one, and two, it's going to increase ultimately produce, because that's providing so much of the color in our diet. We could set a goal for opting for high fiber carbohydrates. So if we're inclined to always cook white rice for dinner, we could opt for brown rice. If we normally buy white bread, or just, let's say white bread, maybe we're going to opt for like a sprouted grain bread because we know we like it. We just typically don't gravitate towards it in the grocery store. We could set a goal for consuming a probiotic rich food every day. So we know how valuable our gut health is. And through research, we know that probiotics can be super beneficial for that, as can be prebiotics. But if we focus on probiotic rich foods every day, we'd be looking at making sure we're getting like Greek yogurt or sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, some tempeh, some of these fermented foods that are rich in probiotics. We could just shoot for a variety and try to get at least one in our diet every single day. And then lastly, we can set a goal to maybe take a walk for 20, maybe 30 minutes every day during lunch. That's a really easy goal that doesn't involve food, but it helps get us moving, get us out, as long as we have time to do that during lunch. And if not, maybe we set the goal to take a 20-minute walk when we get home from work at the end of a long day, or at the end of every work day. All right, so now we've got talking about exploring the process of intuitive eating. So we are innately intuitive eaters. We're born intuitive eaters. And I mean, if we think about it, like babies, they cry when they're hungry, they smack their lips when they're hungry, and when they're full, they're pushing away. But as we age, and due to the environment, our upbringing, all of these things, in diet culture, we can lose touch with that ability to identify the internal messages that our body is giving us, and the ability to respond to that in a confident way. And so what intuitive eating does is it's founded on really establishing attunement and interoceptive awareness with our body. So that means we're able to identify hunger sensations. We're able to identify cravings or foods that we desire. We're able to identify satiety. And then we have a strong relationship with ourselves and with food that allows us to respond to those signals in a confident way, and in a way that is really respectful and honoring to this body that we have. So if you're interested in learning more about intuitive eating, we won't go in depth here. As you see, there are 10 bullet points on here. Those are the 10 principles of intuitive eating. If you want to learn more about it, I highly suggest doing your own research and reading. There's a lot out there. But there's an intuitive eating book, there's a workbook, there's an intuitive eating journal, and then there's intuitive eating cards, like reflection cards that are available, all by the same authors. It's Evelyn Tribole and Elyssa Pattillo. And so you can search those anywhere and do some reading, because it's a great way to really work on repairing that relationship with food and body. And lastly, is the focus on finding movement that is joyful and feels good for our body. If the example I'm going to throw out is, if I was told the only type of exercise I could do was, let's say, like strongman competitions or CrossFit, right? If that was the only exercise I could do, and that's what I was told I had to do, I would give it a try for a while. And when my body started feeling beat up and it wasn't a movement that was bringing joy to my life, I would be less inclined to engage in it. And what I find through the work that I do with individuals is it's the case for most people. We're less inclined to do movement or exercise when it does not feel good for our body and it does not feel enjoyable. An example of this would be when we open up the freedom for us and the opportunity to explore other forms of movement, we're giving ourselves the opportunity to find those things that are joyful, that feel good. An example being volleyball. I love volleyball. I'm an ex-collegiate volleyball player, and for someone to tell me, hey, movement can involve playing volleyball, I am like over the moon, because it is so much fun. It brings so much joy to my life. And you're moving without even realizing it, because it's just such a joy, at least for me. And I encourage you all to do that, because there's power in moving our bodies. There's power in finding the capability of our bodies. And with that, there's value in finding and power in finding all of those types of movement that feel great for this body that we have. So in summary, my hope is that through today's masterclass, you have gained a clear understanding of why dieting is not the answer. And my hope is that you're leaving feeling more confident in your ability to implement these 9 key ways to get you off of that dieting hamster wheel, if that's where you're at. And I'm going to leave you with this quote because I think it is so impactful. And it comes from a good friend of mine who is a mental health clinician. And it says, "Stop fighting your body's physiological need. Work with your body, not against it." If you have questions from today's masterclass, my information is up here as well as Stephanie Lewis. So reach out, please. Would love to hear your thoughts and any questions that you have. And then our next opportunity for you is coming up on the 5th of May. And it will be all about supporting young adults through transition. And we look forward to having you. You can go ahead and get registered and visit our website.
Thanks, Elyssa. And yeah, just to point out that the next masterclass will be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to try a different time slot. So 7 p.m. and you can register on the website. And Elyssa, one question that I get often is Embrace a weight loss program for young adults?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephanie. So Embrace is not a weight loss program for young adults. And we do often have young adult women that come to us experiencing dissatisfaction with where they're at in life and dissatisfaction with their body because of maybe weight gain that they've experienced. And the focus that we take again is on those behaviors. So we're focused on, hey, what's led us to this place of dissatisfaction with self, dissatisfaction with body? What are those behaviors that got us there? And how can we regulate? How can we get those kind of under control? And what we tend to see with most of our students is that once we're on a regularly scheduled eating pattern, we're nourishing our body in a way that feels good. Our body feels taken care of. We're engaging in regular movement. If weight loss needs to happen, weight loss is happening. So we're not driving it, and we do work with a lot of young women that, you know, that's their goal, and we work on adjusting that view so that we're focused on the behaviors that are going to be sustainable for them long term.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for the question.
Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next month. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks for coming.